Hello there! I hope you stay healthy and be safe during this time. Now, I want to talk about the zoo story analysis and the issues. But before we talking about the issues, let's talk about the literary elements first, which is plot, themes, characters, and settings. Plot is the settings of sequence of events that make up a story, while the themes is the main idea. Characters can be persons, unfigurated animate objects, or an animals, and setting is a place or type of surrounding where an event takes place. Now, plot is half of 5, which is expositions, rising actions, climax, falling actions, and resolutions. Now, exposition is introduction to a story, which is the main character names, setting, mood, and time. Now, in here, exposition in the zoo story analysis, Peter sits on the bench reading a book at the park, and then Jerry comes to him in the Central Park a Sunday afternoon. Now, Jerry, most of the time, he talks more than Peter about his life, and then the trip to the zoo, which we can see from the play dialogue here. And then the next is 2 rising actions. Rising actions here is all of the events that lead to eventual climax, including character development and events that create suspense. In here, Jerry told Peter about his neighborhood, the dog, his family, and bizarre story about his life to Peter that makes Peter confused. Even Jerry started to ask him personal questions that make him uncomfortable. The latter situation makes it even more confused, as we can see from the quotations that Peter he is lightly laughing, still a little uncomfortable. The next is the climax. Climax is the most exciting point of the story and is a turning point in the plot or goals of the main characters. Here, when Jerry told Peter a story, the story of Jerry and the dog. After listening to him, Peter already felt so disturbed. Eventually, it leads to a fight, and Jerry stabbed himself with the knife that Peter held. The knife was from Jerry. In here, we can see from the quotations. And then next is falling actions. Falling action is everything that happens as a result of the climax, including wrapping up plot points, questions being answered, and character development. Here, after Jerry stabbed himself, Jerry still talked a little bit to Peter and even cleaned the knife handle to clean the fingerprints of Peter. Jerry told Peter to run, hesitate for a little bit, and finally Peter ran, leaving Jerry alone in the park. As we can see here, Peter rushes to the bench, grabs the book, retreats, and Jerry talked very good to Peter, very good. And then the last plot is the resolution. Resolution can be a happy ending, but it's not always a happy ending, but it does complete the story. It can leave a reader with questions, answer, frustrations, or satisfactions. And here Jerry died alone in the park and the drama ends. As for Peter, he will see things different in life because of Jerry's story, which here we can see his eyes still closed, he shook his head, and speak a combination of scornful mimicry and supplications. Oh my god, he is dead. And then we're going to talk about the setting, which is the first is setting of place. Setting of place here, they are in the Central Park in New York. All place is in one place from the beginning until the end, as we can see from these quotations. The next is setting of times, which we can already know also from the before quotations. The play is on Sunday afternoon in summer, the present. And then the next setting is the atmosphere. Now the atmosphere in the beginning is very awkward, but eventually it begins more suspense and tensions between Peter and Jerry and starts to build up and more, and then it starts just ending tragically. As we can see here from the quotations, Peter indicates his increasing displeasures and slowly growing antagonisms. And now we're going to talk about the characters. There are 2 main characters here, Peter and Jerry. In this play, the character development, nor personally, doesn't really be mentioned clear. The character portrait is floating around the conversations between Peter and Jerry. As we know, this drama is always between them. And then Peter, in his early 40s, he had a stable job and salary work as book publishers. Peter also liked to read, as we know from the beginning of the drama. Now with his stable job, he can be said as upper middle class, while Jerry is unemployed and who is late 30s. He's an employee, he is not very stable either. And then Jerry is a lower middle class man and lives in little apartments. He doesn't have a family like Peter does. He is alone. He comes from a broken family, and that's why he also have an unfair life and felt ignorant outcast by society. The people that Jerry described are real Americans that Albie wants to bring light on critics, which is talk about the society class and how the people feel outplaced because of it. And then we're gonna talk about the themes, which is isolation and loneliness and social class differentiations and family disintegrations. The isolations where Peter feels in the play can be played out because the conversation with Jerry, even though in the drama we see both of the characters, they just talk to each other, but there's no action at all. But we can see that with their conversations. Now, even though Peter have a happy family, yet he still feel like his life is meaningless. And then loneliness Jerry is when no one can connect or feel what his life is. Therefore, no one can help him or feel for him to understand. But Jerry still and always tries to connect to the world and other. In here, we can see from Jerry talk to Peter first in the beginning of the drama. And then where Jerry isolation is feel he is outcasted from the world, he can connect to the others as he is troubled since he was just a little kid back then. And then the concept is this isolation and loneliness and value within oneself. Now, isolation and loneliness is Jerry is the active one who are asking questions all the time, while Peter is the passive one because he just tried to ignore him, meaning that Jerry has a strong desire for a connection. As we can see, even though he's alone, but yet he still tries to find connections with the others. And then Jerry is willing to communicate with the others anymore, but he always finds rejection from the others. Same as Peter, but eventually he can talk to Peter and hear more. And then Peter, who is always suppress his feelings to satisfy the demands of his comedy, creates a sense of loneliness. He believes that to become more mature, meaning that you have to cut off your previous stage in life. And then Jerry used to feel like an animal that trapped in the zoo, prefers to feel that way because even though he lives in a harmonious world like all human beings, but he is rejected by individual. It also satisfies his sense of isolation that troubles him. And then since Jerry's broken homes, the orphan sons, a promiscuous alcoholic mother, and a weak father, Jerry is apparently unable to find solid, loving relationships, and his homosexuality separates him from others. And then Jerry tried to teach Peter the reality of life that has tried to ignore. He also tried to teach Peter the natures of human existence and relationship, but he fails. Peter realized after Jerry that the real life or reality is that humans are unwilling to face their true conditions. They are just trapped in isolation from their own world, just like the animals from the zoo. And then the tragic death, Jerry has important message. Jerry finally can communicate with someone and talk about his life. Peter experienced an awakening and changed his perceptions of the life he had lived before meeting Jerry. Jerry and Peter belong to different worlds, and Jerry that brought them together. The knife that they both holding, meaning that people from all classes sometimes band together to shoulder the same pain and face the same death. Both of them as victims of society that has a deep struggle and a sense of isolation as reflected in their actions. Jerry seeks to communicate with someone to understand him, and Peter seeks to change his stereotype life. And now the main issues. The issue that I want to talk about in the Zeus story analysis is the psychoanalytic. Now, before we talk about that, let's try to figure out no more about what is psychoanalytic. Psychoanalytic theory helps us to understand the personality and the personality development of the persons, and psychoanalysis is a clinical method to treat psychopathology. Sigmund Freud was known as the founder of psychoanalytic theory. He developed this theory based on the development of the physical science of the time. So, in the modern science, now psychoanalytic theory has undergone many refinements. First, psychoanalytic theory emphasizes the importance of unconscious mind, and it governs the behavior to the greatest degree in persons. In psychosis, the mental symptoms like hallucinations and delusions are the repressed experience and unconscious conflicts that uncover the expressions through actions. Now, what I will want to detail to talk about more about is Jerry's mental health in the Zeus story. Now, Jerry is different from Peter, who has a good life. From childhood, he doesn't have that love, the compassion that he needs from his family. So, since they come from middle class society, his parents also left him very early, so he ended up growing alone, which we can see from their dialogue and these quotations. And then from these quotations, either Jerry talk about to Peter about talking about his old past life, about his father, about his mother, and then about his mother's sister, his aunt, that they're all dead. So from this childhood, we can see that many bad things happens to him and it's affecting him. Even though Jerry said he doesn't care about that, he actually cares. Since we are human beings, that we always want to look for others to share our love and care, but Peter doesn't have that. He had parents but no love from them and only just bad memory. Because of this, his mental state can be affected by this. This instability can be seen from the conversations between Peter and Jerry happens in the park. At first, the conversation goes very well, and then it starts to building up more, and then it starts to down again, and then it starts to up again until Jerry kills himself in that park. Now, Jerry is the one who initiated the conversation first, and not Peter. And then the loneliness, isolations, and no one can understand him nor help him is making him more unstable. But despite that, he still knows what is wrong and not, although his emotions make it hard to judge that. The scar from his childhood memory affected his mental health, depressions, and loneliness. Despite that, he still has fighting for his life, willing for his life, that's looking for the thing that he wanted the most, to understand about him more, and compassion and love can be seen from where Jerry is the first one to initiate the conversation first with Peter, who is a completely strangers, and second, where he has a relationship with the landlady dog. Now, Jerry told Peter about this dog, the story of Jerry and the dog. The fact that Jerry has a special way to tell Peter about this dog, not even his own dog, it tells that he really loved this dog, and more than that. And then, from these quotations, we can see that the story of Jerry and the dog, like I say, the way he tells the story to Peter, it makes that the dog have a special place in Jerry's heart. Now, this story is a real interesting because it's actually deeper than that. The dog and him have a love-hate relationship. Even though the dog is always barking at him, but Jerry still tries to love the dog. Like Jerry said here in the quotations from the drama, what I mean is, animals are indifferent to me, like people, most of the time. Throughout the story, Jerry said that he had more relatable feelings toward animals rather than humans. He has more love for animals than humans. It can be seen from the dialogue Jerry that told the story to Peter. He realized that he feels always ignored and visible around his society, always treated like not a person, which with animal he felt appreciated. But the landlady dog is innocent exceptions. No matter how much effort he put into to make the dog love him, the dog still always barking at him until Jerry decided to kill the dog, which is unsuccessful. Since he can make any relationship with anyone and how he deal with these problems, even the God who Jerry said that already turned his back on his life a long time ago, finally found something that can make him still be more sad. And then he found something to turn on into, which is the dog, as we can see from these quotations. And then the absence of human relationships make him suffer because he can't understand what it is like to have a normal life like everyone else. An analogy for the hostility among living beings in a world in which alienation and lack of sympathy are deep-seated psychological conditions, which bring us back to his mental state of health. For Jerry, Peter is a representative of a society where he doesn't belong to and always feel alienation and loneliness. He also hates them because they had everything they wanted and their life is also perfect. So from this, we can see now that this drama is tell us about a lonely man on the verge of a nervous breakdown, desperately attempting to find at least one individual who will hear him out and come to understanding of the existential plight that Jerry sees as a malaise in the world. This led to Jerry killing himself in the park, and yet still told Peter to run away so no one can blame Peter as a Jerry murderer. Indicates that he still does want to be left alone and has still understood towards Peter because he is the last person that he talked to about his miserable life. Desperate to find the love that he wanted and compassion from the others, but in the end, Jerry doing suicide and left the world. And now that is all my points and information about the zoo story analysis. I'm so sorry if there's any mistakes, and I'm so sorry if there's any voices. So thank you for all of the attentions, and I hope you guys be happy and safe. Don't forget to wear mask. Bye.
It's 5:50 something, and I feel so empty inside.